There is a morning I have carried for more than 70 years, and it is a very small one. A classroom in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, the autumn I was 8. A bell, and the scrape of 30 wooden chairs as 30 children stood together, hands over their hearts, and turned toward the flag in the corner. And one child, who did not stand, who stayed in her seat with her hands in her lap and her eyes on the grain of the desk, because she had been told the night before that she must. That child was me. I am 80 years old now. I was carried into the truth when I was 8 and baptized into it at 14, and I stayed inside it for more than 70 years. I married an elder in this religion. I raised his children in it. I buried him 2 autumns ago. I am able to tell you these things now only because there is finally no one left to tell me not to. I want to tell you about that flag, and the mornings I stayed seated for it, and the one morning it cost me something I have never gotten back. But first you have to understand what it does to a child to be the only one in the room. I will get to the worst of it. I promise you I will. You would not feel the weight of it yet. So stay in the room with me. Not for the count under this video, for the child in that chair, and for whatever child you once were. If you were ever the only one in a room full of people, leave one word for me below. Seated. I will know what you mean. We had moved into the truth the way a house moves into winter, all at once, and then it was simply the weather we lived in. A sister knocked on my mother's door the year I was 8, in the lonely years after the war, and my mother Pearl let her in, and by the next spring, the woman my mother had been was gone. Pearl studied, and Pearl believed, and Pearl was baptized, and Pearl became the first enforcer I ever knew. She did it out of terror and out of love, and at 8 years old I could not tell the two of them apart. I'm not sure I can now. Before that spring there had been ordinary things. I want you to know they existed because for most of my life I was not allowed to. A birthday cake with my name piped across it in white, the year I turned 6. A paper chain looped along the top of a doorway one December, red and green, that I had made myself. My father laughing at something, I cannot remember what, only the sound of it. 3 small things. I was told not long after that all 3 were sinful, and that keeping them was keeping company with the world, and I threw the objects away with my own hands. I have never been able to throw away the memories. They are the only things I own from before. After the sister came, the calendar emptied out. No birthdays, no Christmas, no holidays of any kind, no worldly friends, that was the word, worldly, and it meant everyone who was not us, which was very nearly everyone. My father, Walter, went along with all of it without ever quite believing it. He was a quiet man who came to the meetings and said little, and he was no help to a child because he had already made himself no part of anything at all. And school, 5 mornings a week, became the front line of a war I was 8 years old and did not know I had been drafted into. Because every morning began the same way. The bell, the standing, the hands over the hearts, the pledge to the flag, and then the singing. And I could not stand, and I could not put my hand on my heart, and I could not sing, because to do those things was to give to a nation what belonged only to Jehovah. So I sat. 30 children rose around me like a field standing up in the wind, and I stayed down in it, a small, still thing they all looked at and then, in time, learned not to look at. I grew up in Louisburg, which is a college town. Bucknell University sits right in the middle of it, and I watched those students cross my streets my whole childhood, laughing, careless, going somewhere. I was told the college was Satan's classroom, that there was no sense preparing for a system of things that was about to end, that the young people I envied were already as good as gone. So I learned to look at the whole ordinary living world through a pane of glass, and to call the glass faithfulness. My mother had a Bible by then, a New World Translation she had been given in those early years and carried to every meeting for the rest of her life. It sat on the kitchen table most evenings, open, her reading glasses folded on top of it. I want you to hold that book in your mind, because it comes back at the end of what I have to tell you. It was the most present object of my childhood. It was on that table the night before every school morning, and it was from that table that my mother told me again and again to be glad I was hated. I did not understand yet what a strange thing that is to say to a child. I only understood that I wanted to please her, and that being seated was how. Now let me step back and show you how it was built, because a child does not decide to sit through the pledge. A child is made to, by a machine that was already old before she was born. The society, that is what we called the organization then, the Watchtower Society, taught, and teaches still, that a true Christian is no part of the world. Those are the words, out of the 17th chapter of John, lifted out of a prayer and turned into a wall. To be no part of the world meant you did not vote, you did not serve, you did not salute, you did not sing the anthem, you did not celebrate what your neighbors celebrated. It meant the flag in the corner of my classroom was, to us, a kind of idol, and the pledge a kind of worship, and a girl of 8 was expected to withhold her small body from it every single morning as a test of her loyalty to God. And underneath all of it was Armageddon. Always Armageddon. The world was ending soon, and I was young enough to believe I would never grow old inside this system of things. So why make a friend among people who were about to be destroyed? Why let a worldly child matter to you when caring for her was a rope tied to a sinking thing? The isolation was not an accident of the doctrine, it was the purpose of it. A child with no one outside cannot be reached, cannot be told a second story, cannot be shown another way to live. They did not simply teach me to sit. They taught me to be alone, and told me the loneliness was proof that I was right. I want to be careful here, because it would be easy to make my mother the villain of this, and she was not. Pearl was not a cruel woman. Pearl was a frightened woman who had been handed, in the loneliest year of her life, a certainty that promised her that her fear had a cure and her dead had a future. She was doing to me the only thing she believed could save my life. She had been handed her training, and she passed it down exactly as it was given, the way it had been given to the sister who knocked and to the sister before her. No one in that chain was ever permitted to be free. That is the thing I understand now that I could not understand then. The people who wound you inside a religion like that are almost never monsters. They are the previous ones who were wounded, doing their duty. I'm going to bring you to the morning it broke something in me, I promise you I will. But a single morning means nothing until you have seen what made it. There was a woman in our congregation years later, I will call her June, only her first name. June had grown up 2 counties over, and she had been the only witness child in her school too, a little before my time. We spoke of it only once, as 2 grown women at a literature counter, in about 4 sentences, the way people mention an old surgery. She told me she had stopped raising her hand in class by the 3rd grade for anything at all, because she had learned that to be noticed was to be asked why she was strange. She had made herself small on purpose, and by the time I knew her, she did it without knowing she did it. 2 women, 2 towns, the same small girl made twice over. That is not a coincidence. That is a method. Let me step out of this for a moment before I go on. If somewhere in your own life the truest thing inside you once tried to speak, and you called it selfishness or you called it pride, and you folded it up and put it away to keep the peace, then you already understand this video better than I can explain it. I did the very same. For most of my 80 years, I did the same. And what I learned very late, in the first winter I lived alone, I wrote down, one small thing at a time, in the order I learned them. I called it the Freedom Years. The link to it is in the first comment of this video, if any of what I am saying is yours. Now, back to what I was telling you. I told you there was one morning. I'm going to give it to you now. I was 10 years old. No, I had just turned 10. It was the spring after my birthday. The windows of the classroom were open, and I remember the smell of cut grass coming in on the air, which is a strange thing to keep from the worst morning of a childhood, but the mind keeps what it keeps. We had a teacher that year. I will not use her name. She has been gone a long time, and she was, I have come to believe, only another person doing what she herself had been taught. She had noticed, of course. They all noticed. But that morning, for reasons I never learned, she decided she would not simply let me sit. She stopped the pledge. She had the whole room stay standing, hands still on their hearts, and she asked me to stand up. Not to say the pledge, to stand up and explain to the other children why I would not. And so I stood. That is the part I have never been able to say lightly. To refuse the flag, they made me rise. The one morning I ever got to my feet in that classroom was the morning I was made to account for why I never would. 29 children turned in their chairs and looked at me, standing there, and I was 10, and I did not have the words a grown apostate has now. I had only the words my mother had given me. I said that we did not worship anything but God. I said it to the floor. And a boy near the window laughed, and then it was not only one boy. I do not tell you this so that you will feel sorry for a child 70 years gone. I tell you because of what happened when I got home. I was crying. I had held it the whole way, and it came apart at the door. And my mother knelt down, and she took my face in both her hands, and she was gentle. She was so gentle, and she said, "This is good." She said, "They hated the prophets before you." She said, "Blessed are you when they revile you." She told me the persecution was a gift, that it meant I was on the narrow road, that I should be glad of it. And I believed her. Do you understand what that does to a child? They did not only make me the only one in the room, they took the loneliest feeling a small girl can carry, and they taught her to call it joy, so that she could never once set it down and say, "This hurts, this is wrong, I only want to belong to the world like everyone else." I lost the right to my own sorrow at 10 years old, at my own front door, in my own mother's 2 hands. There is a word for what that was, and it is not a word we were ever allowed to use about the truth. It took me nearly 70 years to be able to say it plainly. What was done to that child was not faith. It was isolation, deliberate, and total, dressed up in scripture and called a blessing. They were teaching a little girl to be alone and to be grateful that she was. That is the whole of it. And here is the part I have put off the longest, because this part is mine. I did it too. When my own children came, Mark in 1966 and Lisa 2 years after, I sent them into those same classrooms, and I coached them exactly the same way. When my Lisa came home one afternoon with her face wet, I said to her the very words my mother had said to me. Be glad, they hated the prophets before you. I knelt down the way Pearl had knelt down, and I handed my crying daughter the same instruction to feel nothing and to call it holy, and I named it love, because by then I truly could not tell the difference either. The chain did not stop with me. For a very long time, I was the chain. I live alone now, in the house on Chestnut Street that Raymond and I bought in 1963. I never left it. The people who no longer speak to me live 3 and 4 doors down. The meetings go on across town without me. My son Mark sends a card at the right times of the year and does not call. He is an elder himself now, and he is doing to me, gently and for my own good, what I once did to his sister. I know the shape of it from both sides now. There are not many people alive who can say that. Last year I did a thing I had not let myself do in 28 years. I found my daughter's telephone number in an old address book, written in my own hand and never once crossed out, and I dialed it. Lisa and I are careful with each other now. Some of what was taken cannot be handed back, and I will not pretend to you that it can. But we speak. And once on the telephone, I told her I was sorry. Sorry for the afternoon she came home from school crying, and I knelt down and told her to be glad of it. She was quiet for a while. Then she said she remembered it well. Her own seat, her own classroom, the other children standing while she stayed down. The same silence I had sat in, 1 generation on. 2 children, one behind the other, seated in the same stillness, and only now, both of us old women, beginning to rise up out of it together. My mother's Bible sits on my kitchen table. Pearl has been gone since 1989, and the New World Translation she carried to every meeting came down to me, and I keep it now where hers used to be, her reading glasses long gone, but the book still here. I keep it out on purpose, not because I read it the way she read it. I read it differently now, as a woman and no longer as a frightened child. I keep it out because a great deal of what was done to me came through that book on that table, and I have decided I would sooner look at it plainly every day than throw it away the way I once threw away the paper chain. I am done throwing away the evidence of my own life. A woman wrote to me not long ago and told me she had been the only one too. A different religion, a different town, but the same pane of glass, the same childhood spent watching the ordinary world go by and being told to be glad it did not want her. She said she was 61 and she still did not know how to walk into a room and feel that she was allowed to be inside it. I sat with that a long while, because I know exactly the muscle she is missing. It is the very one they take from you first, when they take it from you as a child. So let me say this to you, whoever you are, if you were ever that child. If you were the only one in the room, if you learned before you were 10 that belonging was dangerous, that safety was solitude, that the way to survive was to make yourself small and call it faith. Then hear me. It was not your faith that made you alone. It was their fear poured into you before you were old enough to refuse it. You are allowed to want to belong. You were always allowed. It was never the sin they told you it was. I waited until I was nearly 80 to learn that a room could hold me. You do not have to wait that long. That is the one thing I am most sure of at the far end of all of it. The years I lost do not come back, not for me, but the years in front of you are still yours, and there are more of them than you think. If you stayed with me all the way to here, thank you. The freedom years begins with the smallest choice there is, the one they took from me first, deciding on an ordinary morning that you are allowed to want something of your own. That is week 1. The link is in the first comment if you would like to begin there. And that is the whole of it. It is late for me. It is not too late for you.